We don't need to consume animals to get our protein. It's harmful for the environment. And if we can build a product that tastes as good as the animal, we're going to win.
Food of the future. This week, what if the whole world went vegan? We look into the impact of a no-meat, no-dairy lifestyle on people and the planet.
I told my friends that I'm gonna become a vegan and live that plant-based diet.
And the green alternative, pork from a petri dish, edible insects, and impossible burgers, the big money behind fake meat.
It's not surprising that it tastes like chicken because it literally is chicken.
Plus, the owner of pied-à-terre brings vegan cuisine to his Michelin-star restaurant without wasting a single piece of food.
I think my grandchildren will not believe you ate meat twice a day? Really?
I'm Amory Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green. Let's get to your Green and Brief with Jennifer Zabazaja.
Here's the climate news you need to know this week. Products boasting about their climate credentials may not be as green as they seem. According to global consumer watchdog IcePen, about 40% of environmentally friendly claims could be misleading. It says this greenwashing may be breaking the law and comes at the expense of genuinely environmentally friendly products. One group the pandemic has helped, South Africa's rhino population. Due to restrictions, the number lost to poachers was down a third in 2020 for a sixth straight year of declines. But that's still nearly 400 rhinos that were killed for their horns, then smuggled out of Africa. Climate change is causing sea levels to rise faster than the most pessimistic forecasts. The revised estimates from the Ocean Science Journal indicate that countries will have to rein in their greenhouse gas emissions even more than expected to keep sea levels in check. The UK needs to speed up its rollout of charging points for electric vehicles if it wants to hit its goals. That's according to the Policy Exchange think tank. It says Britain will need to install 35,000 a year, up from just 7,000 now, to prepare for the ban of the sale of new petrol cars in 2030. And as we chart a course out of the pandemic, the economic recovery is at the front of everyone's mind. But a focus on growth could be bad for the environment. Cambridge University economist Partha Dasgupta says we should do away with GDP and come up with a new measure that takes into account our impact on the environment. And that's your Green in Brief. I'm Jennifer Zabasaja in New York. Anne-Marie?
So what would happen if we all went vegan? Well, the UN estimates the drop on emissions would be monumental, preventing the release of 8 gigatons of carbon dioxide per year. And it's more than just a cultural choice. Veganism is now big business. This year alone, more than 500,000 people signed up to the Veganuary campaign. So we took a look deeper at this growing sector of the economy.
Chances are you're not a vegan, but you may have had an almond latte this week, or at least tofu in your ramen at some point. And even though a really small number of people actually identify as fully vegan, vegan products are filling up and flying off supermarket shelves. That's because more of us are now substituting meat and dairy products with plant-based items.
I told my friends that I'm gonna become a vegan and live that plant-based diet.
So I became a vegan.
I've been vegan practically my whole life.
I'm vegan.
Is it a fad like so many other food trends? Or is it the start of something much bigger? This is your Bloomberg Quick Take on the vegan economy. The Vegan Society was founded in 1944 in a bid to discuss non-dairy vegetarian diets and lifestyles.
They say you gotta eat vegetables. Too much meat's bad.
It began and remained a very small community for decades. But the animal alternative industry is now expected to grow to $140 billion in the next decade. There's something out there for anyone who wants to replace any amount of animal product in their diet, from cheese or yogurt replacements to bloody veggie burgers. But since only 6% of Americans describe themselves as vegan, this growth is coming from outside that community. Our meat-heavy diet doesn't just harm animals, it's killing our planet too. Livestock farming produces about 14.5% of the planet's greenhouse gas emissions. Cows are the main offender. Rearing and feeding farm animals leads to deforestation, which in turn reduces our ability to absorb CO2 in the atmosphere. Research from Oxford University claims that a vegan diet is probably the single biggest way to reduce your impact on planet Earth. Concern for the planet is one motivation, but over half of US adults who eat plant-based proteins said the main reason was taste, beating concerns over diet, animal protection, the environment, and health. Vegan products are no longer the weird, dusty packets hidden in the back of the health food shop. They're being delivered to the mainstream by huge brands like McDonald's and Burger King. There's even vegan beer, because as it turns out, brewers use fish guts for filtration. And the obsession with oat milk has led to shortages in the US, causing hysteria across the country. Well, mainly Brooklyn. Investors are now getting in on the action. Shares of Beyond Meat surged 600% in the 3 months after its IPO. Another plant-based burger maker, Impossible Foods, raised $300 million in the same month. So what could hold this burgeoning vegan economy back? Nutritionists are questioning some of the health credentials of these processed meat alternatives. Burger King's vegan burger, the Impossible Whopper, contains a whopping 35 grams of fat and 1,080 milligrams of sodium. That's almost half of your recommended daily allowance of sodium. Others warn that genetically engineered ingredients need more research to determine their safety. Despite the concerns, there are bullish signs. Traditional meat and dairy companies like Tyson and Dean Foods have invested in plant-based products. With supposed benefits to our health, moving to a vegetarian and vegan diet could produce savings of up to $1 trillion a year on healthcare and lost working days. Like it or not, humans are going to have to shift their diets to help stem the tide of climate change. With our planet's population growing, the vegan economy will need to win over even more of us if it's to have a substantial impact.
Up next, is the future of food impossible? From lab-grown meat to pea protein burger patties, we look deeper into the innovations that are solving problems from emissions to inequality. This is Bloomberg Green. Welcome back to Bloomberg Green. I'm Amory Hordern. Now, would you eat a synthetic steak or maybe chicken nuggets grown in a lab? No, this isn't some sci-fi hypothetical. It's called cellular agriculture, and companies around the world are developing the technology to grow artificial meat in vitro. Now, proponents say it's a no-kill, no-waste method of making food. But will it ever go mainstream? Maybe. It already has.
Cultured or lab-grown meat was largely confined to labs until now. Singapore became the first country in the world to allow the sale of cultured meat. It gave Eat Just the green light to sell its lab-grown chicken nuggets. The San Francisco company has now teamed up with the restaurant 1880. It's put lab-grown chicken on its menu, making it the world's first restaurant to serve up cultured meat. Joining us now is Josh Tetrick. He's a co-founder and CEO of Eat Just. Now, Josh, this meat is made from animal cells, but doesn't involve slaughtering any animals. How does that actually work?
We identify a cell from a chicken, nutrients to feed those cells. So instead of eating soy and corn, we identify nutrients for the cells. And then we culture, scale it up in a large steel vessel. And the process is somewhat like culturing beer. At the end of the process, you have chicken meat or beef meat. In our case, it's chicken meat. The simplest way to think about it is it allows all of us to consume meat, the good part, the nutritional composition, the taste, and do away with the bad part, which is the killing, the environmental deforestation, the acceleration of zoonotic disease, and we can still have a fried chicken.
Now, what are the advantages of cultured meat versus regular meat?
The advantages of cultured meat over conventional meat include safety. So if you look at pathogens like E. coli, salmonella, This way of making meat is just significantly cleaner, more sanitary. This way of making meat radically decreases the probability of zoonotic diseases through our food system. If you look at climate change, this way of making meat is 90% more carbon efficient than the typical approach. And if you look at something that maybe is even deeper than that, the morality of how we want to eat food, we don't need to eat food that causes harm. And with this way, you don't have to cause harm.
Does it taste the same?
And the most common reaction is, this tastes like chicken. It has a flavor profile, it has a texture of chicken, and it's not surprising that it tastes like chicken because it literally is chicken.
And how does it compare to regular chicken in terms of cost?
We're pricing it at right about premium chicken. So 1880, the place that we're fortunate to launch with, a chicken dish is somewhere between $23 and $30, and we're right in that range. In terms of costs, we are, because of the proprietary nature of how we're producing it, we're not sharing costs. I can tell you we're not making money on it right now. But as we continue to scale up, as economies of scale begin to take hold, we see a pathway in the next 5 or so years to get below the cost of chicken. And that's really where things begin changing.
Is there anything we haven't talked about already that you want people to know about cultured meats?
Young people see pretty clearly. They realize that we don't have to bring harm onto our plate, right? We can eat in a way that reflects who we are. The youngest person I know, my niece June, who's 2 years old, by the time she enters high school, I want her to live in a world where the vast majority of meat, beef, chicken, all of it, doesn't require killing a single animal, doesn't require tearing down a single forest, doesn't require a single drop of antibiotics. And we want to run towards that world.
For more, resident green expert Akshat Rathi joins us now. Akshat, thanks so much for joining us. So at the end there, he touches on the fact that his niece is 2 years old, and when she goes to high school, he expects this to be the norm. How marketable is lab-grown meat?
I think if plant-based foods are any indication, there's clearly a hunger for people to eat cleaner, healthier, and guilt-free foods. And so it feels to me, if you're going to be able to buy cultured meat that is like meat but doesn't come with the guilt or the environmental impact, then that's a good idea.
But is this scalable?
It's a tricky challenge. We know that since 2009, these companies have had something like $16 billion invested in them. And now we are starting to see a product come to the market, right? So it is complicated. But clearly, even if the product is here and is slightly expensive, it's here. That means that other types of products are probably coming soon. And we can hope that technology scales up.
Another big industry that the whole green world is looking at is insect farming and making insect protein bars. This is Robert Downey Jr. was saying we're going to do in 6 months' time, have a taste test. But there's this ick factor associated with that. He was quite cheeky and optimistic. I was a little bit more reserved, but I think I would potentially go for it. Europe's at the forefront of this. Is this something we could really see?
I would very happily eat tasty insects, right? We should recognize food and culture are very connected, and there are lots of cultures that do eat insects today. Of course, if we want to make it an idea that is worldwide accepted, we're going to have to work through it, and we may not always cross all the barriers. But insect protein has use outside of human consumption. You can use it for feed, for animals, or even fish.
Okay. Also, the other thing is that the UN has focused on insects and edible insects for over a decade, really, and not so much for climate change, but for food security. How do the two overlap?
So we know that as climate change has impacts around the world, one of the biggest impacts is going to be how people grow food and where they grow that food. So with warming temperatures, the yields of certain types of crops are going to decline, and we're going to have to support farmers to produce the kinds of food that would be adapted to that temperature rise. And we are not quite there. So with farmers being, in most countries, among the poorest, it's going to be not just an issue of food security, but also of inequality. And that's another reason why we should have an alternative in lab-grown foods.
All right, another alternative also, for the record, Akshat Rathi there, our green expert, will eat insects, as long as they're tasty. But if you aren't sold on insects or lab-grown meat, how about plant-based alternatives? The market for fake meat is growing rapidly, and we spoke earlier to Impossible Foods president Dennis Woodside.
We don't need to consume animals to get our protein. It's harmful for the environment. And if we can build a product that tastes as good as the animal, we're going to win. But that product has to be priced properly. And so over the last year, our footprint in retail has grown from about 200 stores to 17,000 stores. Our production's up ninefold over the last 18 months or so. So with that scale, we're getting efficiencies in our production system. We're seeing lower unit costs, and we're passing those on to consumers. And that's our strategy.
Your strategy, probably also the strategy of a few other competitors when it comes to the faux meat avenue. I'm looking at, of course, Beyond Meat, but they've been having big rollouts, for example, in some of the fast food chains. How much are you seeing meat as the key competitor when it comes to price, but also the other fake meats on the market?
Yeah, so we absolutely are competing with the cow. 80% of our consumers in retail are switching from another animal meat product. And 11% are net new to the category, so they're not buying in the fresh meat aisle at all. So we really don't, our business is not growing because people are switching from other plant-based products. They're switching from the animal product because our product's delicious, it's better for you, no cholesterol, lower saturated fat, lower calories. And people are more and more aware of the impact of what they eat on the environment. We're betting that eventually we're gonna have to price at the same price as commodity-based beef, right? Right now, even with these price reductions, we're in the range of organic grass-fed beef, which is a good market, but the vast majority of the market is priced lower than that. So as we scale up, we're gonna have to keep moving prices down.
It's exciting, this game though, coming at a time where the US economy faces significant pressure. We're coming out and still within a health crisis, it's an economic crisis, it's particularly also a social crisis. In terms of being able to target all spectrum of people who want to buy, do you think your price is low enough to ensure that those who are feeling the economic impact right now can afford it?
Yeah, I mean, in some places, we've actually done a good job of getting our price to be competitive. So Burger King, for example, Burger King is a affordable place that anybody can eat. White Castle as well. So we have lots of outlets to get our product out there at reasonable prices. It was really important for us to lower the price in grocery stores because that's where the vast majority of Americans are going to buy their meat. And so this is a step in the right direction. Again, it's not the end point. The end point is going to be to get down to that what we call 80-20 ground beef price, which is your commodity beef. That's some time away. But each time that we see these advantages in scale and we start seeing our margins grow, we're going to pass that along to consumers.
Coming up, the restaurant bringing vegan food to the very top table. My interview with owner of Michelin-starred pied-à-terre next. This is Bloomberg Green.
The responsibility of companies is first to reduce their carbon footprint.
We also want to exit coal, and there's obviously a consequence to it. And we do see the shifts, obviously, also in the natural gas market.
Hydrogen and the promise of hydrogen is not new. It can be a fuel.
Secondly, to report. And by report, they mean not just say what they've done, but what they intend to do.
We know what it's going to take to achieve those carbon emissions, and we'll be at the table having the conversation.
We've seen it's now over 1,200 companies, major companies around the world have signed up for net zero plans.
We're developing a lot of technologies that are supporting the environment and that are going to be needed for the Green Deal in Europe, but also for the plan that is being developed at this point in time in the US.
We're very much looking forward to working with the new administration on their energy and their climate agenda. It's great to see their focus specifically on offshore wind. Our 4.4 gigawatt joint venture with Equinor, I think, will only grow in America over the coming years, and we're looking forward to building on that.
Welcome back to Bloomberg Green. I'm Amory Harder. London's pied-à-terre celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. The famous Fitzrovia restaurant opened its doors in 1991, received a Michelin star just 13 months later, and has been on the list ever since. But like many other eateries, the pandemic turned the business upside down. Pied-à-terre adapted by providing a delivery service, though it rocked the boat again by making the entire menu vegan. I spoke to owner David Moore and asked him why.
Vegan is something that is solidly here to stay. If you've got any common sense at all, you've got to get on this story now. I didn't want to be somebody who's jumping on a bandwagon in 5 years, saying, okay, yeah, we're going to put a vegan menu on. I did the vegan menu because, number one, it interests me. It brings a different clientele. It brings in a much younger, a very big LGBT crowd, a groovier, sort of like funkier, younger crowd. It's also menu fatigue for the customers. Regulars who I know are not vegans will come in and have the vegan menu. Keeps the kitchen and the chefs energized, having to think slightly outside of the box. But the home delivery was different. Home delivery was because I couldn't see delivering the pied-à-terre food, which is it's very showy, it's very finessed. That jumping around in a box on the back of somebody's bicycle for half an hour, I didn't see it landing on anyone's plate in any good shape or form. Let's do something that nobody has any expectations of. So I came up with the vegan.
Will every restaurant, even Michelin-star, will have to have a vegan tasting menu?
If they want to continue being profitable and attracting the clientele, it's a number that I've not heard before, but there are over 125 vegan restaurants in London, which was a figure that surprised me. I heard the other day. You can see it going mainstream. There's lots of big players opening.
What is the reason for this? Are a lot of them health conscious, or are they more climate conscious?
I think they're just more conscious. I don't think that I could tell you if they were climate versus animal, but they're all tied up together though, aren't they, as well? I think my grandchildren will not believe, you ate meat twice a day? Really? I think it's going to change seismically in the next couple of decades. The vegan food will become more interesting.
Is it as expensive to create a full vegan meal?
There is some discussion about margins. If we look at it pound for pound, the produce is cheaper, but there does tend to be greater input in the kitchen. So my reason for charging the same is we have more man hours going into the dish than we would with a protein. Your piece of fish comes in, and you might pay £5 or £6 for it, and it's ready to go. Steam it, you pan fry it, and then you add your garnishes. When it comes to a vegetable, we have a lot more work to turn that into a main course.
And it's not just the dishes you serve. You actually have a very sustainable supply chain. Can you walk us through what that looks like?
All our suppliers are known to us and have been for years. I started thinking that maybe that lamb that we have on at the menu shouldn't be coming from the Pyrenees, it should be coming from Wales. If we have pork on the menu, the farmer is Fred, he's out near Chester. The beef comes from Richard Vaughan in Gloucestershire. If it's hand-dyed scallops or langoustines, that's coming from the guys up in Scotland at Celtic. We know all our suppliers, we know how they look after the animals, and the animal husbandry is extremely important, not just because of my conscience, but also better the animal is looked after, the better the quality of the meat.
How do you create vegan food on a Michelin-star level?
Just doing the food that we do, and we get a Michelin-star for doing that. We cook our dishes, and the chef, Asimakis, he has a standard and an interest level. He wants to create interesting food. It's not something that we're consciously thinking, what would a Michelin inspector think of this? We're doing dishes that we find interesting and also challenging. For this dish to work every time, it's got to be so precise.
And you don't use meat substitutes?
I don't believe that vegan food should look like a chicken burger, should look like a hot dog. Because if you're thinking of eating a hot dog, just eat a hot dog. Don't make something that looks like a hot dog out of lentils. That's not my style. Plant-based food that looks like plant-based food.
That's it for this edition of Bloomberg Green, but keep the conversation going. Follow us at Climate. I'm Amory Hordern, and this is Bloomberg Green.